Kerry has apparently drawn a second red line when he answered a question of a reporter off the cuff and said, well, war can be averted if the Syrian regime simply turns over its chemical weapons. Joining me at this time is veteran White House reporter and publisher of White House Dossier, Keith Koffler. Keith, welcome back to the program. Keith joins us from Washington, D.C. Keith, we talked about this in our opening segment with Frank Gaffney a moment ago. It looks like an incredibly amateur move by John Kerry, and it looks like it's creating all sorts of confusion, and the Russians are exploiting it.
It's amateur hour. It's incomprehensible. All of a sudden, off the cuff, as the president is trying to galvanize support in Congress among the American people for war, for at least an attack, which could lead to war, John Kerry gets up there and just in the answer to the question casually states that, well, maybe Syria could get out of this by allowing the international community to gain control of their chemical weapons over the next week. And it's not even policy. It's just something that he came up with. Now, all of a sudden, it looks like Syria has an option. The Russians, quite cleverly, grabbed it. The Syrians grabbed it. They're talking about actually doing that. It gives them an opportunity to delay, to say, well, we can't quite find these chemical weapons yet, but we're working on it. They could stretch this out over weeks. And, the president's case will suddenly diminish if he can't do something right away. There's no way that he could restart a march to war, a march to making these strikes after it's been delayed for several weeks. And now they have to deal with this. And it was very clear at the White House. The White House today, they tried to say that this was just kind of a theoretical thing. Well, it wasn't. The Secretary of State was very precise. And I think most of the world thinks that when the Secretary of State says something, that's U.S. policy. But apparently not with this group that's running the nation.
You're right. He's representing the administration. People aren't going to stop their daily routine and break down, well, what was his position? What's the hierarchy of responsibility chart? And another thing it demonstrates, Keith Koffler, is we have Russian President Vladimir Putin, who is a former KGB top guy, and we have Barack Obama, who's a former state senator and community organizer. This is being on full display right at this moment. Isn't it interesting, as you point out and as you wrote today at WhiteHouseDossier.com, it wasn't by accident that the Russians, who are siding with Syria on this, jumped all over Kerry's statement immediately.
No, the Russians are very careful. Whatever you want to say about them, they know what they're doing in terms of foreign policy and realpolitik and Machiavellian sort of maneuvering. And, people like Obama, who have no experience on the world stage before being president, and even John Kerry, who seems to be bumbling along in many ways as Secretary of State, they're like putty in his hands. And so he now has exploited it. I think we can expect the Russians and the Syrians to be going to the world and saying, look, we're for peace. We want to try to solve this problem. Let's talk about it some more. And that's going to create a very difficult position for the president on Capitol Hill to be making his case that we need a strike now, when the very thing that Republicans have been saying, and some opponents of this who are not persuaded of Obama's arguments, is that, well, maybe there's something between an attack and doing nothing, and this seems to present an opportunity. It's really going to complicate their whole lobbying strategy, both with the world and with Congress.
It exactly does, especially with the president going on national television in prime time tomorrow to make his case. Kerry could not have timed his comments worse. All right, now tonight on CBS News, President Assad of Syria, the interview of him sitting down with Charlie Rose, amazing, Assad sitting down on American television, that airs this evening. Here's a quick video clip of that interview.
Well, Charlie, let's get right to it. What did he tell you?
Well, he denied that he had anything to do with the attack. He denied that he knew, in fact, that there was a chemical attack, notwithstanding what has been said and notwithstanding the videotape. He said there's not evidence yet to make a conclusive judgment. He would not say, even though I read him the lead paragraph of the New York Times today in a story about their chemical weapons supply, and he said, I can't confirm or deny that we have chemical weapons. He did, however, say that if, in fact, we do have them, and I'm not going to say yes or no, they're in centralized control, so No one else has access to them. He suggested, as he has before, that perhaps the rebels had something to do with it. He made some references to Aleppo. The most important thing is he basically says there has been no evidence that I use chemical weapons in against my own people, and that there is no evidence of that. And if, in fact, the administration has evidence, then they should show that evidence and make their case.
Of course, that was actually Charlie Rose giving the comments about his interview on Face the Nation. Keith Koffler, it seems like the Russians and Assad are being very bold at asking President Obama on a world stage to show us your proof. I mean, as you say, the Russians are savvy. I don't think they would ask a question unless they knew the answer. That's just me. Why do you suppose they are so bold in their statement, show us your proof?
Well, remember, what they're doing here is they're prodding for weaknesses. Remember, the whole Iraq war was waged based on what was supposedly solid evidence of Iraqi WMD. What happened? We got in there. We didn't find any WMD. The whole world knows that. So they know this is a potential weakness in our argument. They know that the rest of the world is looking at this and thinking, do we really have the solid evidence? Even President Obama hasn't said it's absolutely ironclad. So again, very cleverly, I think they're pushing at the little button that might get people to think twice about supporting an American strike against Assad.
Do you think it looks desperate? Not that Assad goes on American television. That's kind of, to me, that's kind of interesting in a quirky sort of way to most Americans. But Barack Obama going on Fox News tonight after continually berating Fox News, calling it something other than journalism, tonight he goes on Fox News. It looks like desperation.
Exactly. This is the whole problem for President Obama. I mean, first of all, he's going to be on Fox News, going to make the case tomorrow night. Every time we've seen the president try to make a case publicly for himself, he's been able to make the case to get himself elected. But that's it. Look at Obamacare. He did the same thing with that. He was all over the TV shows. He was on Fox News everywhere, trying to make people like Obamacare. It didn't work. It just, the White House pulled him off the air because, if anything, the thing was becoming more unpopular. Same thing, in other areas where he's tried to drum up popular support. He can't do it, and this is not going to work. It's a desperation thing. People, are not going to change their minds based on what he says. We've already seen that. And, the same thing on Capitol Hill. I mean, that's kind of desperation, too. He's been slamming Republicans for years for all sorts of perceived crimes that they have committed in his eyes. And now he's at the door, knocking on the door saying, I'd like your support. I'd like to work with you. And then, it's just not gonna work at this time. People understand, the attitude that he's had, just like the people at Fox News. And now all of a sudden he wants to be friends. I mean, it's just very amateurish again. All
right, Keith Koffler, again, veteran White House reporter, publisher of WhiteHouse.ca. We appreciate you joining us. One final question: if you had a crystal ball, would you say that we are not going to take military action against Syria because of all the events that have just happened the last today, for that matter, with John Kerry and so forth, or do you think this administration moves forward?
I need a very high-quality crystal ball for that one. I think ultimately, one way or another, he's going to do it. Even if maybe the Senate will vote in favor of it, the House won't vote, and then he'll say, well, I got some support. I think ultimately they are geared up to do this one way or another.
He really wants to do it, doesn't he?
Wrong.
He really wants to do it.
He wants to do it. They are committed to this. They are lobbying like they never have before. They have the worst lobbying operation I've ever seen. I covered Bush, Clinton. They have absolutely no lobbying operation at the White House. But this time they are gearing up everybody to do it. They are serious. They're going to find some way. But I could be wrong about that. I don't know.
Why are
That's
they
just
so?
my hunch.
I lied a moment ago. I said final question. I'll throw one more at you. Why are they so committed to attacking Syria? Is it really Iran that they want to get to?
Yes, I think that's part of it. They want to show Iran, because really, that's a very good point. Obama does not want to have to attack Iran. So maybe there's some hope that if he does this, the Iranians will get a little scared about things and they'll maybe come to the negotiating table a little bit more seriously. Also, his credibility really is on the line. If he loses this in Congress, if he has to walk back from what he established as a red line, the rest of his agenda is really in trouble. He really looks weak, and he doesn't want that. There are things like universal college education and all kinds of other things that he wants to do, and I think he really feels like he'll be, unable to move these other agenda items if he loses on this.
All right, Keith Koffler, once again, thank you for joining us from Washington, D.C. We'll see what happens tonight, tomorrow night, I should say, with the president's speech. All right, so why is it that a 26-year-old graduate student that is on the payroll of Syrian rebels is advising John Kerry and John McCain on Syria? Isn't that a tremendous conflict of interest? That's part of our Grassroots Citizen panel next, and one of those members is a columnist covering that story. That's up next. Don't go anywhere.
If there are any historians about 50 or 100 years from now, and there should be preserved the kinescopes for 1 week of all three